Quad 66. All right, here it is, the Ranger 3.5. This is a frame I've been working on for a long time, and I'm finally ready to go ahead and release it. So specifically, this frame is, you can see it's a unibody in terms of the main frame, base plate, and it is 148 millimeters motor mount to motor mount, and it's tended to be built up for a 3.5 inch rig. Here's my current rig right here. And I'll go through the specs of the rig to build a little bit more. But the intent here is a frame that, or builds up like this to about 105 grams and flying on a 550 4S battery, which is 60 grams, brings you to a total all-up weight of 165 grams. And so that's kind of the idea that the frame was based around. I think the frame does have more material than it needs for that particular weight, but I wanted to err on the side of providing very nice, robust noise damping and not having to worry about crazy filtering and tune issues. I'd rather just have a more robust frame because this build is so powerful that you got plenty of headroom. The build was based around a lot of the work done by Recursion Labs in terms of testing out these 1404T motors and these HQ tri-blade props. And so I knew that powertrain was really powerful, really efficient, and so that's kind of a lot of what I based mine build on. I didn't necessarily have the bandwidth at this size to test a whole bunch of different motors and combinations myself, so I went off some of the work that's already been out there, and huge thanks to Recursion Labs. I haven't seen these posted recently, but without him, it would have taken me even longer to bring this frame to market, just because he put his information out there. So the features of this. This frame has both 20 by 20 and the 25 by 25.5 mounting, so that's the inner and outer holes. I went away from my slots because on the production version, this is going to be, the screw holes are going to be chamfered out or countersunk to be able to use these flathead screws for the stack screws. And that is for a very specific reason. And that reason is that I have found that one of our best filters for noise in frames is a battery that is stuck right to the frame very securely and very snugly without anything moving away from it, so that it keeps the plate from moving. So any noise that goes into the frame gets dumped into the battery, and that is the same mounting points that we have for the flight controller, so that if the flight controller's mounted these screws, we've got a ton of damping, mechanical damping, physical damping, right at where we're mounting our flight controller, and I found that really helps with noise issues. A couple other things about this frame. Very specifically designed around this powertrain, but I do give you options. So with these 550 batteries, if we look at the bottom of the frame here, the room is basically just right about perfect for this battery to snug in. So that keeps it out of the air. You can see how the battery hides underneath there. And I think that does help with being able to cruise at a higher speed with less drag from battery and wires and things hanging out. The other thing it does too is this battery is locked in. So if we crash and bump and things like that, ejection is much less likely, because you can see how the canopy part of it, the cage, comes down and extends past, so that way that front battery is not going anywhere. With the battery straps, there are slots cut out, and you can see how they go here. But there are also options to go the other way. So if you want to fly with a bigger battery, like an 850, and you want to mount it, it's not going to quite fit if we go kind of lengthwise here, but it will fit very nicely if you flip the straps around and you can mount that horizontal. So you do have the option to go to longer batteries like the 720, GNB 720s or 850s. I think that's not going to be typical. I think most of the time people are going to be flying with the 550s or more square-shaped batteries if you're going to larger sizes. This frame, one of the big other features I designed, and this one has it, I introduced it on the Touring 122, which is our quick release canopy design. But before I show you that, let me actually throw this on the scale to show you the weight. And I want to throw this on the scale first, just because when I pop those screws off, my table has slots, and when I pop the screws off, I might lose them underneath, and I want to do this before I do that. So with all the hardware needed to build up the frame, so that includes a little screw on front, a little nylon nut, a little screw on the back of the nylon nut. So our frame weight comes in just under 25 grams, which I think is pretty competitive for a pretty solid chunky frame. And so that quick release mount, to show you how that works, is that these screws, if you just loosen them a touch, not much at all, that loosens it up. And then what you can do is you can go ahead and slide that screw straight out the back there. And you can do that on both the front and back, but once you've released either the front or the back, this canopy will slide right out and it'll hinge out. And that gives you very easy access to work on your quad. And I've really liked that feature. It's been really helpful for working on things. The other thing it does, and this wasn't an intentional, but it's a side benefit as I finish this design, a side benefit, and I'll show you what that is. You can see now that this takes a little bit of kind of tension to slide it back in place. And when you look at the frame and the canopy, see how it's wider up front than it is in back? So this utilizes the camera as an additional like structural piece to the canopy where it adds strength to it. I don't think it really puts any like damage tension or concern like that on the camera, but it adds another point of rigidity up here. But because this carbon fiber is angled back, we're actually flexing and bending it, and so it's spring loading this carbon fiber, which takes out any of the mounting slop. There's just very little mounting slop, and when everything is tucked in, and I knew I'd lose that screw. Oh, found it. When everything is tucked in, that makes for a very, very rigid frame. And what I found on the canopy, and what I found on the Touring 122 is that this canopy actually does quite a bit to dampen noise as well. So between the features of mounting the battery flat to the frame and nice and solid on there, as well as a canopy which has a nice tension across it, creates such a nice solid structure that it really helps with the noise issues and helps dampen all that out. One of the challenges with these canopies, you can see there I've got a couple screw mounting holes, is you kind of have to pick the cameras that you're going to use on this and drill out the holes for that. I think what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to release open source, or like use as you will, the files for the canopy, so that if you want to use a different camera, what you can do is go ahead and modify the position of the holes and get a custom canopy made for yourself. I think that's the best way to go, rather than me trying to like think of every popular camera design and saying, oh, I'm going to do it for this or that. So within the realm of the 14mm cameras, so these like kind of smaller micro-sized cameras, I've specifically designed this around two cameras. One of those is a camera I really, really love. This is the HDZero Nano 90 camera. It's the Runcam Nano 90. And I really love this camera. And so this is perfectly designed to protect that camera when it's mounted in that further posterior back, back towards the tail hole. Then the front hole is for the Walksnail camera, and it's specifically for this one here. This is the 4.3 camera. This is the camera, if you buy the bundles, this is the camera that comes with the heavier setup. It's not the lighter, like the Whoop light. I forget what their nomenclature, I'm just not up on it. but for their VTXs. So if you want to build up what I've built up here, you want to buy the camera and the VTX separately because you want specifically the camera that has the 4.3 native sensor in it. The camera that comes in kind of their Whoop bundle or their 1S Lite bundle or whatever you call it, it's a 16:9 camera. The width of the sensor 16:9, and unfortunately, two cameras that look nearly identical. And so unless you go and measure it out, you would think that these are the same exact cameras. And as far as like the external parts and the geometry of it, and I made that mistake in thinking, oh, it's the same camera and I can just have the option of 4.3. It's a different length. And so unfortunately, it's too close to drill out two different holes, but too far to use the same hole. So if you look at, get this one mounted in, and so this uses the Walksnail camera uses the hole that's more forward. The camera sits a little bit too deep, and given that this is a 16:9 camera with a super wide angle lens, a super wide field of view, you are going to see, if you use this camera, the 16:9 one, you are going to see the edges of the frame. And I went back and forth and revised it and tried to get it to work with one set of holes, and ultimately it left me with either not enough protection for the 4.3 camera or the guards in view on the 16:9. And so my solution is I can't make everybody happy, I think. So what I'm going to do instead is say, if you really want to build this frame and you want to do the 16:9 camera, go ahead, get it. And what you're going to do is grab the file. You're going to modify it to put that hole exactly where you want it, and then have like CNC Drones or whoever else you want cut that for you. And I think that's really the only kind of like tenable, feasible solution to it. I think that covers the main features of it. Some of the limitations, some of the downsides of this frame. One of those is, mounting. This does have screw hole mounting for both the smaller, I forget what it is off the top of my head. I think it's like 9x9 or the two standard sizes that you'll have in kind of like the 1404, 1604 kind of size motors. You will be able to mount both of those on these little motor feet. As you can see here, there is not a lot of motor protection. There's a little, but not a lot. So on these 1404s, if you go up to 16, I think it's not even really have much protection at all. So this frame is not really a basher frame. If you smash it, hard enough, the canopy will break. If you smash the arm hard enough, it'll break. It's not going to give you a ton of motor protection. And the point of this is that this Ranger build, it is kind of a proximity quad. It is still going to handle incredibly well, but it's also designed to go a little bit, and that's the term Ranger. It's a little rangy. It's not a true long range, but it does go a little bit rangy. It lets you get out there and explore stuff, and that's why I have this one for myself built up with Walksnail. I get better range with that, and but it still flies well. If I want something straight proximity, I would throw the HDZero system on it. The latency is just much better, but I don't get the range on it, and camera quality is slightly worse. So for when I'm going out and exploring and enjoying nature, this Walksnail system makes a whole lot of sense. In terms of like builds and stuff, this is a snug, but not terribly snug build. I left some extra space between these boards, and so with the flight controller on the bottom and the VTX on top, I still had enough room, even leaving extra space in between these two. I had enough room to stick the receiver on top, and this is a larger receiver because it's got the diversity. It's a happy model diversity ELRS receiver, and you can see it does fit in there. It doesn't touch anything, so it does clear. Otherwise, up front, in front of the stack and behind the stack, you got a good little bit of room. I did stretch this frame out compared to some of my other designs to fit the battery that way, and that does add a little bit extra room to throw stuff in there. And I've got like a little buzzer back there. You know, if you ran out of room up top, you could easily fit your receiver up front underneath the camera. There's, you know, all kinds of options that you have. One of the other things I figured out, it's a little feature, is it's like, yeah, great, I've got this quick release canopy mount, but then I've got like antennas mounted off the canopy. What do you do about that? I have a solution. My solution is that with zip ties, for those who've been around this channel a long time, you'll know my love for zip tie canopies, is that using a zip tie and a little bit of shrink wrap, I can quick release my antenna, and so when I loosen my canopy, it'll swing straight out and the antenna is no longer attached. And then when I put it back together, I can slide that zip tie straight back in there, and I'm good to go. Pretty rigid, looking good there. I do have that specifically mounted off the carbon fiber rail rather than this little standoff in between, just because I found when the camera is mounted to the standoff, that has a tendency to kind of twist that back and forth and loosen up that standoff, so that's that little quirk there. Otherwise, the way I have this built up is I'm using a TuneRC Poly F405 board. I like that board a lot because it's very light, but the capacitor it comes with is too small, and that's giving me problems with my GPS. I've got a little, I think that's the Flywoo, their smallest Flywoo GPS on there. I was having issues with getting satellites, and what I found was going up to a bigger capacitor solved that issue pretty well, good enough. I still do when I want the absolute best satellites. I've got this wired up here, or sorry, right here, where my power lead to my GPS, I can run a separate 1S battery, or if I don't really need that many satellites, I can plug it in and run the power off the board, and that works pretty well. So yeah, I've kind of have gone through the build that I have here pretty well, but to kind of summarize it, for the flight controller, I've got the TuneRC Poly F405, goes up to 4S, and I do fly this on 4S. I've got the T-Motor 1404s, and the KV on these, I forget what it is. It is the 30, what does that say? Oh, shadow. It's like the 30, does that say 30? Yeah, 3,800 kV. And it's got the H-Cube tri-blade prop. It is the pitchier of their tri-blades. I'm using, on this particular build, the Walksnail 1S VTX with the Walksnail Nano camera, specifically the one with the native 3.4 sensor, or 4x3 sensor, sorry, I'm saying that backwards, 16:9 and 4x3, yeah. 4x3 sensor. And then I've got, what else am I doing? The Happy Model Diversity Receiver. And I'm using the Beta FPV antennas there, Express LRS antennas. The Beta FPV ones are a little bit more rigid material, but still very lightweight. The Happy Model ones are a little too soft and they get bent up a little too easily. True RC Singularity VTX antenna there, and I already talked about the Flywoo GPS. And so yeah, the way I've got it built up here, that gets us to a dry weight 105, put a 60 gram battery on it. 165, you're still way under 250 grams, so you're perfectly safe there. And obviously you have some room to go up on motors and batteries. Flight footage, there is plenty of flight footage already on the channel so far. If you just scroll back through some of the videos, any of the kind of rangy stuff is coming off of this quad. And I will also post up a video about how the black box looks on this quad and the tune that I have. It's pretty easy to tune. Didn't have to go super aggressive or anything on it. And didn't have to do anything crazy with the filters. This is a pretty clean quad. All right, I'm excited. Finally got this one out. The Ranger 3.5. That is the frame. You can get this from CNC Drones. The link is down below. Hit that. Buy it. Let me know what you think. Well, or don't buy it if you don't want to. No, but do. I get a kick out of when people build up my frames. I like seeing them. You know, post it up on Rotor Builds or throw it up on Facebook. Tag me. Show some flight footage. You know, whatever else you like to do. It is kind of it's satisfying when people build up your stuff. I mean, I think anybody who designs frames or quads or things like that, you know, I think we all get a kick out of seeing people actually use it. All right. Till next time. Cheers.